Hello everybody, my name is Aide Torres and I'm going to be sharing with you today Isabel Allende's House of Spirits, and this is her book. It was written in Venezuela in 1981 but wasn't published till 1982 in Spanish, and then later on published in 1985 in English. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about the author, Isabel Allende. She was born August 2nd, 1942. Currently resides in Rafael, California, with her family. She's in her 70s, but she's originally from Lima, Peru. She's an author and journalist, and she focuses on magic realism. I think a key fact to focus on is her early life, and that is she is the niece and goddaughter of the former Chile president, Salvador Allende, which influenced her writing later on in life. Because he was assassinated and overthrown in 1973, and that's when she found refuge in Venezuela, and that's where her first novel, The House of Spirits, came about. She's also famous for her other works like Of Love and Shadows in 1987, The Infinite Plan in 1993, Daughter of Fortune in 1999, and Zorro in 2005. I wanted to share with you first the Webster definition of magic realism, and that is painting in a meticulously realistic style of imaginary or fantastic scenes or images, a literary genre style associated especially with Latin America that incorporates fantastic or mythic elements into otherwise realistic fiction, called also magic realism. Okay, so the summary of The House of Spirits I found very interesting. It's kind of related to a lot of other plots or storylines. It starts off with a very wealthy family and their daughter, and this young man that wants to marry the daughter, Rosa. Unfortunately, he does not come from a privileged family, a family of wealth, so he has to work really hard. He goes and tells the family that he wants to marry Rosa, and they're like, come back when you have enough money. So he goes off to the mines, and that's where he works hard day and night to save up money. In the meantime, back home, Rosa stays with their family and her sister, Clara. Clara is a young sibling, but she has supernatural abilities, so she can kind of predict future, tell you what you have to do in order to maintain a lover, to win money, to keep your house. She has those supernatural abilities. And then one night she predicts that there's going to be a death in the family that is not accidental, and she was referring to the death of Rosa, her older sister. And turns out that her older sister Rosa is poisoned. She's poisoned on accident because they really want to kill her father. Her father is this politician that's wealthy, that's clearly not into some good deeds, so they want to kill him. Either way, Rosa is dead, and that really impacts Clara, her younger sister, that has these supernatural abilities. So then what happens is they have her funeral, and Esteban comes back. He comes back, and he has enough money, but he's like, why? Like, why didn't you wait for me? Like, we could have had a family, we could have started something new. And then, okay, yes. So, and then Esteban decides that with the money he had already saved to marry Rosa, since he's not going to marry her, he's going to buy an hacienda, so a piece of land, and that land comes with workers. So he works his butt off. He makes this hacienda the biggest and most producing hacienda the region has seen. So he becomes very wealthy and powerful, but he mistreats his workers. So his workers are scared of him. They don't like him. But they do what he wants them to do because he's paying them, basically. So in the meantime, he comes back to that wealthy family where Rosa was from, and he wants to marry the daughter. So the youngest daughter that they had, the one that has these supernatural abilities, he wants to marry her. Well, it turns out that Clara hasn't spoken since her sister's death. But when she sees Esteban again, she magically starts talking to him. So they get married, everything goes good, and it's all happy and dandy. But Esteban's sister has to go live with them. So Esteban's sister goes with them, but she like secretly has a crush on Clara. So it turns out super weird, and yeah. But then they get pregnant. They have a beautiful daughter named Blanca, and then Blanca, she is now considered this jewel by her dad, Esteban. But then she falls in love with the little boy that is not privileged, this little worker, this little field worker that they might call it. So her dad sends her off to boarding school. So she's off to boarding school. A few years later, she comes back after boarding school. She's done with that, and she still loves this little boy, but who is now grown up. So secretly, they meet by the river. They do their stuff, whatever. But then this other guy comes in the picture that wants to marry Esteban's daughter Blanca. He's really wealthy and rich, and wants to be more wealthy and rich if he marries into this family. Well, anyways, he catches them doing their stuff by the river, and then tells her dad, and her dad now wants to kill Pedro. And that's how the story ends. He's basically chasing them, wants to kill him because he had intercourse with his daughter, and now his daughter's pregnant, and now they're gonna have a bastard in the family. And in the meantime, it's super crazy. Clara, his wife, is not talking to him anymore because he just, I don't know, he went crazy. And then Pedro, this boy that Blanca loves, is low-key starting a riot. Like, he wants farmers to have rights. He wants them to ask for what they need. And, yeah, it's just really crazy and controversial. And I think it has a lot to do with the author using her experiences and what she's been through in the book. And I feel like she uses a lot of the characters, like Clara, it can be related to her grandmother, and then her son Nicolas, and her ex-husband, and herself. Like, you can see them throughout the novel. Again, the main characters are Clara, Esteban, Rosa, Farah, Esteban's sister, and then Esteban is Esteban's bastard child that he had with one of the workers that he raped. And then there's Blanca, the daughter, the legitimate daughter of Esteban and Clara. And then you have Pedro, which is the farmer's child that Blanca loves. And then there's Transita, is a prostitute that Esteban keeps going back to when he needs love or when he wants attention. So I found some really good quotes that I enjoyed from the movie and from the book. Like Clara says, revenge does not do any good. So throughout the story, you can see that there's a lot of moments for revenge, but it ultimately comes down that revenge does nobody good, because it just goes back and forth. And towards the end, when she's dying, I like that she said dying is only a change of form, because she'll still be with them spiritually or watch over them. And then what's interesting is when Esteban kicked out his sister out of the house because he knew that she secretly wanted Clara, like there was this weird I want you connection. He kicked her out of the house, and she said, I curse you, and that he's going to end up alone, which he ended up being alone at the end of the story. And then Esteban Garcia is the bastard child of Esteban and the woman he raped. And when he was looking for Pedro, he put out a reward for him. And then when Esteban told his dad where Pedro was, and he asked for his reward, he didn't want to give it to him because he said snitches do not get anything. Which was totally, I don't know. And then there's Blanca, their daughter, where it says that there are real relationships between events. So she believes that every event that happened through the story, everything that has happened has a connection, and that she learned that from her mother. And that also survival of the fittest, because throughout the book you see that there is a lot of controversy between political parties, the liberals, the conservatives, and all she says is that it's survival of the fittest. So the people with power win. And then there's Pedro that all he wants to do is good. Like he wants to have stand up for the farmers. He wants to have rights. He wants to do all these other things, and he encourages the farmers. And then there's Transita, and she's the prostitute that he keeps going back to because he feels love. And she tells him that he's the man of the soil because she's seen his hard work go into the hacienda and bring it up from nothing. And then there's all these themes that come up from the novel. So the theme of family, the theme of memory and the past, literature and writing, perseverance, violence, women and feminism, society and class, the supernatural, freedom and confinement, and politics. They're all touched upon throughout the book. I feel like the ones that stand out the most are society and class, because Esteban, whether or not he wanted to admit, he didn't want his daughter to marry Pedro because he was of a no class. But when all reality, when he wanted to marry Rosa at the beginning of the story, he was a nobody. He didn't have a class, he didn't have money to marry her. So it was kind of contradicting. And then obviously the supernatural, because Clara had these supernatural abilities to predict what would happen. She predicted her parents' deaths. She predicted that when she got pregnant it was going to be a girl and she was going to be called Blanca. She knew that when her husband told Blanca that he had killed Pedro, that he was lying because Pedro was still alive. And then literature and writing, because throughout the novel you see that Clara didn't want to speak anymore after her older sister's death, Rosa. So she wrote everything down. She lived in her own world, in her own reality, basically, with her own characters, and she lived with the spirits around her that she created. And then when she dies in the end, she gives all these things that she'd written down, all her journals, all her books, to her daughter, so she can understand a little bit more about the relationship between events. Okay. So then one thing I wanted to talk about was Gabriel Marcus, 100 Years of Solitude, and Isabel Allende, The House of Spirits, because there's great controversy and talk about how she took or borrowed or wasn't original with her ideas of the House of Spirits, because she borrowed them from Gabriel Garcia's 100 Years of Solitude. And what happens is they just say it's a feministic twist on the ideas of his book and how he interpreted magical realism. But then there's those who defend Isabel Allende and say that she had her own original ideas, her original thoughts, but they were just a feminist perspective. So in the end, after comparing both stories, I feel like there is a lot to borrow, but I feel like how she says in the end, she learned a lot from Gabriel Garcia Marquez, so she liked the concept of magic realism. She liked his story, she liked how he portrayed it, so I feel like there is no way that she couldn't get ideas or she couldn't get the same concept of writing from somebody that she learned so much from. But of course, the feminist perspective, because she was a woman, she is a woman, and she lived through things from a woman's perspective. And then from the article, he gave us back our history. There's an interview they did, an exclusive interview, and I like this quote that she said, and it says, "I think what happened with the magic realism and why people all over the world connected to it is because the world and life are very mysterious. We don't control anything and we have no explanation for everything. And we try to live in a controlled world because we feel safe." And in this book and the books that followed, there was the explosion of the unbelievable, which is around us all the time, and it's unacceptable. And it's unacceptable that we don't control anything. There are no explanations, and there is something that there are spirits, and there's I suppose that the centuries ago it meant any phenomenon like electricity that would be considered magical. Maybe in 200 years of solitude, we will be able to explain what is now magical to us. So in the end, just like everything, she feels that you can't explain. There isn't a reason for everything, and that's why it is magical realism. There is no right or wrong. It's just how you interpret things. And that is it.